Okay, I'm speaking Lee style today. The first time I had Lee talk, she had a talk written on the back of an electricity receipt, so that doesn't look much different to that. I've been asked to speak to you about my roles as a chaplain. Most of you will know that I worked for 4.5 years as a prison chaplain, and I've just done 2 years as a hospital chaplain. It wasn't anything that I'd ever considered doing. I was quite happy in my job. I worked, my background is I've been a psychiatric nurse, and I've also trained and qualified as a social worker and worked in education and welfare. I was quite happy with where I was working. I was fitted quite nicely, a lot of variety, wasn't looking for another job. The only thing that did irritate me about my job is that when I was helping and supporting people, I was more supporting them to keep them comfortable where they were without God. Then one day Richard showed me a job description, and I was like, that is so weird. If somebody wrote a job and they did it just so I could apply and nobody else, that is a job description they would write. And I was like, why are you showing me this? And he said, I think you should apply. And that was for a job as a chaplain at Humber Prison. Men's prison. Never occurred to me that they'd employ female staff, which of course they do. Prison officers, males and female staff all the way through the prison. But anyway, I applied and I went for the interview. And like my experience of that place, like you go in and you go through like the security to get in. It's all locked doors and walking all the way through the prison. You go past some of the wings and people are shouting at you. And I had my interview. Hannah's nodding at the back because she's worked in prison. And I came out of the prison and stood outside the prison. And it's like, yeah, thanks God, I'm not going back in that place in a million years. Anyway, long story short, I did 4.5 years in the end. I mean, because Richard had advised I applied, I just went back to him and I was like, no, it's all right, thanks. I don't need to go work there. I'm fine where I am. And he was like, you're just scared. I'm like, yeah, isn't that a valid reason? And then I thought, how boring. How boring if I just keep doing what I'm doing because I'm scared. And I loved what Nina shared about hope. Because sometimes, I don't know, you can even go to pray and you just think about the negative things or think about the concerns. Yes, it's good to pray about those things. It's good to give them to God and trust God. But then sometimes we'll stay in that or we'll just look for our own comfort. And that's quite limiting. What if we hope? What are our hopes for the day? What are our hopes for the weeks? What are our hopes for the year? We need to be praying about those things too and stepping out of our comfort, because then we end up having amazing God experiences. If we want God to use us, we need to step out of our comfort. We need to trust him, and that's why I chose those verses. It's things that we often pray about. I can't turn around and read them, and you still hear me. But we'll often sing in worship, send me. Do we mean it? We sing that song, don't we, about take us deeper. And I find that a really dangerous one, and I have to think before I sing it. Do we mean these things? Do we want God to send us? And then I've put up there as well about he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Sometimes we just like, I can't do this. But actually, God calls us to be obedient. He will equip us. He will work through us. I had no idea what I was going into in prison chaplain. I didn't know what a chaplain did. I had a bit of an idea from the job description. I knew it was going to need my social work experience as well as my psychiatric experience, as well as the theology I knew, but I didn't know. And there were so many times in that place and in my current job where I just had to trust God, and God did equip me. And he did so much more than I could have expected him to do. Yeah, I've covered them. So, what was it like being a prison chaplain? I'll talk you through what I did in my working week. So you start before you even go to work. You have to get dressed in a way where you're completely covered up. You have to make sure you've got your belt on with your chain attached. You have to make sure when you're going in that you've left your phone in the car. If you get in and you take a phone in, it is actually an imprisonable offence. It has happened. I had a volunteer come to me one day and say, I have a phone. So you then have to escort them to security, who takes the phone off them and may escort them out or give them another chance. That one was dealt with by a letter because they're spoken to. But actually, it is very, very... If they'd been caught with the phone rather than admitting it, they'd then search the phone and check that no photographs have been taken, no messages have been sent. So it's things like that that go through your mind. And I know I've been sat in meetings and it's like, oh, this is the first meeting I've been in where somebody's phone won't go off. And then it's like, what if it does? What if it's in my bag? And you sit there for the full meeting convinced that your phone in your bag is going to go off, even though you know you haven't got your phone, you've left it in the car. It's a weird experience being without a phone because you get so dependent on them, but actually I really liked that. I liked that people couldn't ring me and I couldn't ring them. I liked being cut off and actually just being at work. So you go through the security system. Sometimes it's just you take things off, put them through like in an airport and walk through and then get searched. If the alarms go off, get searched randomly. Sometimes you all get filtered off somewhere else for extra searches where there's dogs. But if that doesn't happen, what you're doing is you're going through an extra security system using fingerprinting, you're drawing your keys, you may be drawing a radio, you check onto the radio, and then it's like a 10-minute walk. If I turned right, I can't tell you too much, but if you turned right, you've got one side of the prison. That side of the prison is built in a circle with the wings around, and the wings themselves are circular with 2 floors of prisoners' cells. The other direction, there was a block with an induction wing and another wing. And then there was what we were based on in Chapel, which was called the M1 corridor with wings off. And those are like the wings that you see on telly often. And it's exactly the same. You've got your ground floor, you've got a set of cells, next floor set of cells, next floor set of cells. And we've also gone past the segregation unit as well on the way in. And I say, sometimes people would shout to you. Usually it was nice when they got to know you. So, Mondays. What would I do on a Monday? You'd print off your list for the day. On a Monday, I often did a Living with Lost group. So I'd print off my list for the group. Pick up any messages. Go stand at the chapel door, we'd unlock the door, and they had what they called was line route. So the men would be released, the route would be lined with officers, and the men were allowed to go. And they had to go to their work, because they work when they're in prison, or they would come, if they had a chapel group, they'd come to the chapel group. Or they might go to healthcare. Line route was always interesting. People would come, and you'd check them off, and in they'd come. Other times people would come and have an argument with you that they were supposed to be in your group, but they weren't. Other times, if something had gone missing from chapel and the word had been put out, you'd stand there and next minute you'd have an object in your hand. You didn't know how it had appeared, but somebody had passed it back to you because you didn't steal from chapel. There was codes in prison. Another time I was stood there watching and somebody got flattened and didn't even see it happen. But anyway, line route's done. You do your group. No, we didn't have officers in with us, so you could be responsible for 15 people. You got to know the people as you built the groups up, but that was still quite a lot of people in the early days to know that you was responsible for. Didn't always have a radio. So you did have alarms on the wall, so you made sure you sat where you knew where the alarms were. But as you got to know people, you could read the room, you could read the people, but you didn't know always. You have to always be on alert for security. We also might have somebody, while you're getting your group together, who was coming because they've come to light a candle in remembrance of somebody. So you're like trying to look after your group and light the candle and get that person back before line route's finished, and if not, you had to get an officer. We had people turn up sometimes, step in, I come to seek sanctuary. I'm not going back. If I go back, I'm going back on the roof as a protest. So you let them in because you don't want them doing a roof protest. It's about the security and focusing on what is the safest. So then you listen to them, you get officers, and you deal with the situation. You never quite knew what was going to happen. So you do your group. Group would end. You think, right, send the men back. But you need an officer to send them back. And then you could go and do the rest of your work. But you could sit there for an hour and nobody come to send them back. So you can't go anywhere. And that isn't always the best. The men start to get fed up. So again, you're watching. And once they got so fed up, one of them set the alarm off. And I shouldn't have seen the funny side quite so soon, but it was a case of, you said there was no officers to take them back, but hey, look, there's 30 of you now. The rest of the day would be done. We had orderlies as well who would come down, so we couldn't leave. If we had the orderlies there, we'd have to take them back. We'd always do a segregation round, so we'd speak to everybody in segregation unit. We'd do what's called axe visits. So at any point, there could be anywhere from 10 to 20 odd people on what's called an act, and that is people that were at risk of self-harm and were being watched at various times. And we would have to visit everybody on that list at least once in the week and talk to them. On a Tuesday, my day would flow, again, axe visits, but I would also do inductions. Another of our statutory units says that statutory duties was that everybody who came in had to be seen by a chaplain, so you were going and meeting with people you didn't know and talking to them. On a Wednesday, I did a study group, Christian study group, and that was really good. This was like my church. On a Sunday, people that met with me regularly, the people that came on a Sunday as well as to study group. And then you'd have other people that you'd visit for pastoral visits as well. I can't go through everything because the time is limited, but that is one massive thing in there, as well as your statutory duties, as well as being there for staff and being there for all the prisoners. You did have responsibility for a group of people. Sunday services, everything that happens here would happen there, but often you were doing it on your own or with volunteers in. So you were having to check people in with security. You had officers in there. And you imagine when you're speaking and you've got radios going off at the back and officers that maybe don't want to be in there, as well as men. Some have come for the service, but some haven't come for the service. It's constantly aware of the security when you're leading a service. Other duties was we were the ones that would have to break bad news if somebody had something happen in their family. But you'd get a phone call. Relatives would be desperate to speak to their relative or for us to go and tell them the news. But we never knew if it was a malicious call or not. So we'd have to check all those things out before we went and broke the news. And sometimes you could get 2 of those calls in the morning, but you were the only one on, and you had the Sunday service to run. So you get quite a lot of things coming in. The COVID experience there was really intense. It was proper lockdown. Everybody was in riot gear because of what had happened in other countries. It was very, very tense. But it was an amazing experience. I had a bit of an attitude to start with. I want to be at home like everybody else. But in the end, it's like, actually, it's a real honour, it's a real blessing. I'm able to visit my church in here. And we did the Sunday service by letters, went round to every single door. We had about 150 people on the list at one point. They got a letter from us every week. People used to say, oh, they're only coming to chapel for coffee. These people weren't getting coffee, but they were getting hope through their door every week. But also we had to be aware not everybody can read and write. So we ended up making videos as well that went out on their TV channels for them. I ran the character course, 10-week course, with a lot of the men during COVID. And they would fill it in each week, and I would go back and talk to them. And that was one of the things. Yes, security was a main thing, but rehabilitation was absolutely massive and at the core of everything we did. And giving hope. Nina mentioned hope at the beginning. Giving people hope. And had some amazing stories. Somebody at a church, I won't say where the church is, came to me and said, oh, we've got somebody at our church. You never even actually spoke to them, I don't think. Because he said they came to chapel to swap drugs with a friend. The friend wasn't there. They decided to stay anyway. They liked what they heard. They made a commitment. They were due to be released the next week. They came to church. They now volunteer for us. We don't always see the difference that we've made. Other times you'd see men acting differently, behaving differently, responding to situations. You'd go visit them in the cell and you'd catch them with worship music on, reading their Bibles. We did see real changes for people, real changes. But, I mean, one of the things during COVID, I did pick up on all the bereavement work. One of the things that they said was that one of the main things for people harming themselves, trying to take their own lives and violence, was bereavement and grief. So I went through the list of everybody that was being seen by Crew's bereavement. I went through the list of everybody that had had recent bereavements, and we just picked them up and went with it and visited and visited and visited all those people. And I did end up burnt out. But again, it's one of those things where we can take comfort and security in what we know, and I could have just stayed. But I felt led towards going to hospital chaplaincy instead, and it did take a bit of a push for me to go. Again, I thought God was having a laugh. Hospitals aren't my favourite places. I'm rubbish at visiting people. When I went to work in prison, it's like I'm here out of obedience. Help me to enjoy it. And it was the same when I went to hospital. It's like it's an honour to do this. It's an honour to visit these people. I don't want to do it as a chore. Please help me to enjoy it. Please help me to really honour these people. And honestly, it is such an honour to visit people. I'm not going to say too much about the hospital chaplaincy. You feel free to sort of come and ask if anybody does want to know any more about it. I'll just say we are there for staff, same as in the prison. We're there for staff as well as for patients. Do some things like that are a bit different, like we're starting to run some retreat days for staff. Did a reverse Advent calendar for the whole hospitals and the North Lincolnshire hospitals, where we ask people to donate things, and then staff could come and pick items up nearer Christmas if they couldn't afford things. I do a prayer meeting on a Wednesday morning for staff. Christmas Day was lovely. A doctor came and we shared experiences, and she was really encouraged because she's come off the stroke unit, and she was really encouraged when I was telling her about Mike and about how when we'd heard that Mike had had a stroke and gone into hospital and how quick he was out, and how I was thinking, well, couldn't have been a stroke then, he was out too quick. But he'd been prayed for. It's the power of prayer. And I was talking to her about it, and she was massively encouraged as well. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of prayer. There's lots of things I can't share with you. Mike gave me permission to share that, but I go out and pray for people. And you do see things change. Sometimes people are healed physically. Other times you're giving people hope. We have wards that we're responsible for. We try to build up relationships with the staff. But there's so many wards to visit, it can be quite difficult. We cover Hull Royal, cover Castle Hill, cover CHCP, we do the Beverley Hospital, we do the Jean Bishop Centre. We try and do routine visits, and sometimes people don't know why they would refer to a chaplain. But we can do emotional support, pastoral support. It's all about spiritual, it's all about pastoral. But it's also about faith if people have got faith, but it isn't limited to the faith visits. We do on-call. We're a 24/7 service. I work one weekend a month where I'm in Saturday and Sunday. One night a week I'm on call. Call-outs are never going to be good. A lot of the visits you go to are end of life when you're called out. Now, it's a real honour, a real privilege to be with families at this time, to be with patients at this time. But you know that hospitals cover everybody, from the unborn all the way up to babies, children, young adults, older people. We know sometimes people are end of life because of illnesses, because of age, but also there's traumatic things that happen, accidents, sudden illnesses, choices people make. Some of the visits are really, really traumatic. I have been called and walked to visit thinking, I can't do this, I can't do this. And it's like, no, this family can't do this either. But I've got God, and I'm going to take you into that visit. We have to read rooms. Sometimes we go into situations and you're looking around at the family and different things that's going on. We don't always know what to do. People don't always know what they want us to do. And you stand there and you're trying to read body language, listen to conversations, talk to different people, and do what is going to help people at end of life, help families as they come to terms with what's happening. And I really do need to pray at those times and hear God. Sometimes I'm listening to people. I was sat listening to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I was just thinking, I need you to stop. Can you get trauma from listening to somebody else's experiences? I mean, this person really did need to talk, but sometimes it's hard to listen. So again, I do need God. But we know we all need God. I don't know how long I'll do this for. That's up to God. But, yeah, for now, I'll do as God uses me in the hospital. And just going back to those things, you know, I didn't choose either of these jobs. I do believe that God called me. He equipped me over years to be able to do what He's called me to do, and He works through me, and it's such an honor. There's easier things I could do. Sometimes I just think, oh, I'll just go do that job. But you know, really, I want to be where God has called me to be. So if God does call you to step out of your comfort zone and to do something different, then yeah, go for it. Sometimes we think, what can go wrong? But actually, what can go right? And you know, if we do things in obedience to God, He will honor that. We don't have to be perfect and get everything right. We just need to be obedient and willing, and God will work in us. God will work through us. I think that's everything. I couldn't even read that because I took my glasses off. So there you go.